Welcome to the Founder CEO Conversation. Today we're thrilled to have Howard Berman, the founder and CEO of Koya Therapeutics, with us. It's an insightful interview where we explore his family's influence and personal background, how that contributed to his entrepreneurial drive and resilience, innovative therapeutic developments, the healthcare industry, his vision and mission at Koya. We learn about Koya itself and its inception story that involves the unfortunate diagnosis of his father with dementia. His father passed the same week he IPO'd his company. He told him not to be afraid. Let's dive in and hear from Howard himself. Enjoy. Howard, pleasure to have you on the Founder CEO Conversation. I'm excited to learn more about you.
Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. So I'm really curious about you, the person. It takes an interesting person to start a business. It takes an interesting person to be the founder and CEO of the business. So I'm kind of curious on maybe early things that happened in your life or developmental moments throughout your life that made you who you are and into an entrepreneur.
Sure. Well, I think it takes actually a crazy person to do that, because to found a company, to launch it and raise money and to bring it from a private to a public company and foster it and put all your sweat, blood, and tears into it is a tremendous amount of energy, mental energy, that is, physical energy, and stamina. And unless you have that, and I can tell you, you cannot be in this process meek or have a thin skin. You've got to be able to overcome many barriers and obstacles. So I think it takes somewhat of a crazy person, but it also takes someone who is driven by something meaningful and who believes in a story so much that one wants to pursue that. And I do. And that's why I evolved to start this company. I've always been an entrepreneur, but ultimately the mission-driven approach that I've taken with Koya has propelled me to where we are today.
What are some things throughout your life that gave you a little bit of that craziness, that gave you belief in starting a business, or things that give you that thick skin that allows for you to persist through so many of the difficult parts of running a business?
Well, the thick skin has not always been there. There was a veneer, a layer of thin skin when I was growing up. And I did not like the negative perceptions others may have felt about me in the past in growing up in middle school and high school. And those sorts of things I took personally. And so I've never been in the past, and I've had to learn the type of person who would have the chutzpah or the stamina to start a company and to take it all the way through. But I can tell you, my parents, my mother was and she's retired now, she was one of the world's leading experts in cancer prevention. She actually became a world leading expert at MD Anderson, starting the department in cancer prevention and epidemiology. She was put onto the National Cancer Advisory Board by Barack Obama, and she's won numerous awards. So she's been a great motivator for me, and she's shown me that if you want to do something, do it right and don't be afraid. And then my father, who unfortunately I lost him about a year and a half ago, and he plays into this whole story of Koya. We can get into that. He was a person that told me, don't do anything half-hearted, go all the way. Do a body of work. Make sure that what you do is meaningful, and don't be afraid. Never be afraid. And that lesson that I learned from my father has always stuck with me on the side when things have been tough and when there's been challenges along the way.
Tell me about the founding of Koya and how it relates to your late dad.
So my father, he was a triple board certified physician and a brilliant man. He took us from South Africa to the United States, where I was born in South Africa, and I moved here when I was young. And he started over at 40. And he grew up his practice, and he became very well renowned here in Houston himself. And then he retired, and we noticed, just as many families do with their loved ones, a case where he started to miss names and he got lost. And this started to escalate, and we took him to a doctor, and we realized that he had some form of cognitive loss. So I, at the time, was at a big company, a big pharmaceutical company. So I had a lot of connections, and I pulled some strings, and I got him to see Dr. Appel, Stan Appel, at Houston Methodist. And Appel is one of the world's leading neurodegenerative disease experts. And it was through that meeting a number of years back that I became acquainted with Stan and his work in regulatory T cells, we call it Tregs, and the impact that that could have in diseases like what my father had, in dementia, in Lou Gehrig's disease, in Parkinson's disease. And the opportunity spun off from there. I became close with Stan Appel, and it was with him that we decided to found the company Koya Therapeutics. And the research was very exciting in the potential that Tregs can play in these conditions. And we ultimately took the company public after we founded it. It was the last week that we went public that my father passed away. That same week he died. So it was a more bitter than sweet, but it was a coincidence. No coincidence. There are no coincidences in life, but it was an occurrence which happened simultaneously. And I know that what we're doing is very meaningful, and it's just.
So, were there any last words that he gave you as in part of your in part of founding the company was the struggle he was going through in dementia. So, did he give you any final words as you made that next step with the business and he made that next step in the human existence?
He always said to me, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid." I think that's the message that we should use for our entire lives. Any entrepreneur, anyone in life, don't be afraid. What's the worst that can happen? If you conduct your business professionally, if you do things the right way, there's nothing to be afraid of. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of encountering barriers or obstacles. And if you truly believe that, don't be afraid that there's some safety net out there for you, then it takes away all of that anticipatory anxiety that so many people have.
How does it? I've always been enthralled and I've always respected the immigrant's journey, and so you had that, and with your parents. How was all that? How did it make you feel coming over here? Must tie to the "don't be afraid" theme of your father's advice to you and the way you live your life.
Well, immigration at the time, we came from South Africa. It was heating up because it was a just thing to do. If you recall, South Africa was under apartheid when we moved. Apartheid was terrible, of course, and a lot of people were leaving South Africa for better lives for their children. So it was the right thing to do. So my parents were escaping, if you will, and they were coming to a country where the opportunities were better, and it was a country that was more just, if you would. But it's never easy starting from scratch, and it's almost like starting a new business. So my mom and my father, both physicians, they had to start from scratch, and they had to build up. My mom more in academics and my father in private practice, but it was starting from scratch. And that's the journey of any entrepreneur, and that's the journey of any immigrant. Is you come to a new country, you're not familiar with places or people or things, and you don't have money, and it's the goal is don't be afraid. Is just realize, try your best. You have your family and you have each other, and as long as you have the smarts and you have the temerity, then things are going to be fine. And they did, and they succeeded.
So I'm gonna shift a little bit here to the role of founder CEO. So you obviously got the guts to found the company, smarts to be the CEO. So I'm curious on a couple things. Want to first ask, what's the scrappiest thing you ever did as a founder? As founders do a lot of scrappy things.
Well, the most challenging thing was in 2022, the biotech climate was abysmal. It was probably the worst biotech market in a generation. People were having enormous trouble in raising money, whether a private company and certainly a public company as well. We were private at the time, and I can tell you, we realized that the easiest way to raise money would be to go public. But going public in 2022 was an almost impossibility. And imagine here's a founder CEO in myself who had never I didn't even know what an S1 was. I didn't know what going public was. I had no background in finance. So my goal was raise money, and people told me, oh, you have to go public. So we bucked every trend. I was able to help write, and we did this on 5 people, write the S1, do the audit, complete the commitments by investors, and get the S1 through the NASDAQ process, which was not easy. NASDAQ was not allowing, where they were not accepting S1s, and they were very stringent because there was a moratorium, if you will. So we were the last IPO of 2022 in biotech, if you can believe that. I think December the 29th.
Nice.
And there were 12 IPOs in total. And we were the last, and we were successful. And it was a tour de force, but we succeeded, and it was a very scrappy occasion. I was on holiday, and I was working the phones, trying to finish up the last rounds of money. And ultimately, we ended up all putting in money ourselves into the IPO, which pushed it over the fence and allowed us to close the deal. So I can tell you, we were up against the wall, and we were at the last second of the clock, and we made it happen.
Nice. I'd say that's a great combination of being a scrappy founder plus being a smart CEO. I think it counts as both. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing. So next time, I'm curious on if you could tell me about a little bit about this journey and the I like to say the juxtaposition of the founder and CEO. You know, when did you realize how different the roles were? Starting the company, incorporating and all that stuff, and then realizing like there's a lot of different roles that have to be played in a business, and what are some maybe stories or things you realized over the last couple of years that made you understand your role as CEO?
Well, what I realize is that no one person knows everything, and that one needs to rely on people who have expertise in a specific area and let them run with it, and that it's only teamwork that can get the projects and the work done. So I've been successful because I brought in good people. I've hired excellent folks who have been there and done that before. We rely on them to execute on the various the areas that they're focused on, and it's because of that we're successful. If I were to do my best at these specific and be in their lanes, and I was half putting my time into doing audits and some clinical development, we wouldn't be as successful. So it's relying on your team in order to make the projects go on time and make things happen. And that's, I would tell any CEO, and I would tell anyone who's working in biotech or any industry, is hire the best people that you can, because those are the people that are going to ultimately make this ship go forward.
What are some of the roles that you take on day to day, and how have they evolved? What were some roles?
Well, I oversee every aspect of the company in terms of finance and in terms of investor relations, clinical development. But my day-to-day is, as a public company, is to make sure that we're running on track and on time, that we're filing our IND for clinical trials on time, that we're talking to investors and investors are understanding of where we are at any given time, and that everything is transparent, and making sure that our financials and our quarterly filings and any other filings are on track and on time. So I take on a multidimensional role as a public company CEO, and but again, it all relies on that the people that I have underneath me are doing what they should be, and they are.
I think now's a good time to get some more context on Koya. What is Koya? What do you guys do?
We are developing therapeutics for neurodegenerative diseases, like what my dad had, like dementia, for instance. And because inflammation plays a central and critically important role in patient decline, we are developing biologic drugs that you can inject in subcutaneously and slow or inhibit the inflammatory cascade. But what we do that is unique is we are giving two separate drugs at one time that target multiple pathways and mechanisms, because unfortunately these diseases are complex, driven by many different pathways. And by giving two different drugs, it appears to be a much better way to alleviate this complex inflammatory cascade. Our drugs are intended to boost up the regulatory T cell, which is called the Treg. The Treg is good because it's supposed to slow inflammation. It's a cell that controls inflammation. We do that while we simultaneously inhibit other pro-inflammatory cells. They call them cytokines and macrophages and myeloid cells. These are other cells that are responsible for inflammation and other things like oxidative stress. So by doing all of that together, it can have a synergistic effect to slow or inhibit the inflammatory process. And that appears to have a very beneficial effect in these neurodegenerative conditions.
How about, what stage are you in? Are you in the stage of innovation or commercialization or somewhere in between?
We are in innovation. We are in drug development. So we're in the process of running clinical trials to try and prove out safety and efficacy and the blood biomarker correlations. And we're doing that across a number of different disease conditions, starting in neurodegenerative diseases.
Okay.
And so we, of course, have to run the trial, and if we can prove safety and efficacy, then submit it for commercialization to the FDA.
And so I'd imagine that the investors they understand that portion of it. So right now there isn't that pull to start commercializing before the product is ready.
Of course, yeah. No, you have to show efficacy and safety and get it approved by the FDA. So you don't commercialize it until that happens.
Okay. So tell me more about this opportunity to treat these diseases. Is someone doing it already? How big's the market?
Well, ALS, there's very little. Lou Gehrig's disease is a disease that is incessant in terms of patient decline month after month. Patients die on average in 2 to 3 years, unfortunately. It's a horrible disease. The patients lose their ability to move their muscles and use their muscles, and that ultimately can lead to respiratory failure. And so there's very little out there, unfortunately. There's drugs that may lessen or very slowly or be very slow in inhibiting the decline of patients, but the patients continue to decline month after month. So I think the need is very high for new and novel treatments that can make an impactful difference. And you see the same thing in general across the neurodegenerative space. Maybe not as much as in ALS, but Alzheimer's is a huge unmet need. Parkinson's is a huge unmet need, and so on. So unlike autoimmune diseases, where there are now biologic drugs that are starting to make an impactful difference. Neuro conditions are unfortunately flailing. And so what we're doing is really, if we can show something meaningful, it can change the landscape.
Why aren't the incumbents of the healthcare industry able to crack the code? Seemingly they have endless amounts of money, whatever, tens of billions. What's your theory on why they're missing?
Well, it's not for a lack of trying. There's been a lot of people who have put a lot of money to innovate and try and discover drugs that can make a difference, but they fail. And part of the reason is not understanding the true mechanism of the drivers of the disease. That's first and foremost. And number two is the diseases are complex. And as I mentioned before, it's probably the drugs that target multiple pathways, that block multiple mechanisms, are the ones that are going to be most impactful. Drugs that target one mechanism or pathway, it's just, unfortunately, these diseases are not single mechanistic diseases. Some of the other companies have targeted genetic causes of the diseases, like in ALS, but unfortunately, in ALS, for instance, the genetic underpinnings of the disease are only found in a very small subset of patients. Most of the ALS cases are driven by sporadic causes, and so there's many different genes that probably are involved, and it's not a single mutation that may drive the disease. So what we're doing is we're innovating. We've innovated thanks to the work of Dr. Appel, that the regulatory T cell, the Treg, is at the central core of what causes these diseases to progress. And that if you can control inflammation, and you can do it through a number of different mechanisms, that can make a meaningful difference in slowing, maybe even stopping the disease. And so that's why I think the innovation has built up over the last few years to the point that now we're really capitalizing on this science.
How big of an opportunity is it?
Well,
in the sense of dollars,
Well, first, let's not talk dollars and cents. Let's talk about how much it will mean to patients living longer, and the families and the caregivers. I think if we can make ALS a more of a long-term disease, like an HIV and AIDS, I think it can be transformative. The patients, if you've ever met a patient with ALS, they're some of the best people that you'll ever meet. For some reason, they happen to be, Dr. Appel calls them, it's good guy disease, because almost inevitably, every person with ALS has this incredible demeanor and this motivation to benefit humanity and a great attitude. But in terms of dollars and cents, it's $1 billion market potential. Another company that got their drug approved, unfortunately, the drug was removed because it was not shown to be efficacious. In the first year alone, they showed a tremendous uptick in sales, beating every estimate. And the reason is that the desperation of patients and physicians, and that it's a very localized, centralized industry where there's approximately 80 physicians who prescribe, I think, 50% of all the prescriptions out there. It's not like cholesterol or some of these other diseases where it's distributed around the United States among thousands of physicians. This is a very concentrated group of physicians. So that's why the uptick will be so high.
I want to go back to your comment about people with these diseases like dementia, ALS, them being, I can't remember the exact word you used, but essentially they have a more positive demeanor. Tell me more about what you've observed and why you think so.
Well, I've met patients with ALS, so my personal experience has been they are unusually optimistic and have this attitude that they understand that what they're going through is a challenge for them, but they want to do things for the next person. And that if it doesn't work out for them, at least they're benefiting to medical science and understanding this terrible disease. I've seen it in multiple occasions that I've spoken to patients. And then, of course, Dr. Appel has relayed countless stories to me over 50 years that he's treated ALS patients. And undoubtedly, these are just incredible stories that I've heard. The patients are giving and caring and thinking about other people around them and their family members. And I haven't heard about other diseases where you have the majority of patients who have this outlook on life. So I think that Dr. Appel's perspective is that the genetic underpinnings of this disease also perhaps are the same genetic underpinnings that cause them to be such altruistic individuals.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I'm curious on your thoughts about the healthcare industry as a whole. If you care to give commentary on what seems to be a lot of people's thoughts that there's a lot of failures in healthcare, and I don't know if you'd want to speak to that, but I'd be curious on what you think.
Failures in developing drugs? Are you asking?
More so, I'm asking this is more specific to maybe why is it that maybe doctors would focus on pills opposed to living a more healthy lifestyle?
Sure. Well, I think things are changing. I think the field of biohacking, people are starting to take health into their front of mind. People are eating better. People are watching or making sure that they exercise more, and I think that is something that's more understood. And I think physicians understand that healthy living is better. But again, I think this all is not done in isolation. I believe that pharmacotherapy is an important part of maximizing your output in terms of your health. And I think it all needs to be done together. It synergistically works together. And I don't think that it's in anyone's best interest just to prescribe a pill or an injectable without attempting to change that person's life in terms of how they conduct. If you have high cholesterol and you have your LDL is through the roof, it's not sufficient just to say take a statin drug or a PCSK9 inhibitor. The person needs to start exercising. The person needs to start eating a healthy diet, a Mediterranean diet, if you will. Everyone has to be accountable for his or her actions. And if they all need to make a difference in their own quality of life. And that's part of being responsible. And it is not medicinal science can only do so much, but you've got to take it the rest of the way.
How about the future of the healthcare industry? Are we going to live to 200 years forever? Well,
let me ask you, would you rather live to 100 and be healthy and have your faculties and be able to understand who you are and who your family members are, but die just shy of 101? Or would you rather live to 200 and for the next 100 years, after you turn 101, be in a state of stupor and having someone take you to the bathroom and go to bed at night? I would like to be a healthy person at 100 and die in my sleep.
Yeah,
and the fact is that I think our cells have a clock that is ticking. We're ticking time bombs, and the cells are genetically programmed to undergo what's called senescence. Senescence is this the cells essentially start losing its potency, and the machinery stops working, and it slowly stops resembling a functional cell, and that happens over time. And one of the key things that drives that is, guess what? Inflammation, but not an acute inflammation like an infection, like you have a bacterial or a viral infection, but slow, we call it smoldering inflammation. It's this chronic inflammation that builds up over time, and slowly over time that leads to aging and cellular senescence. And that's probably what is the clock that is slowly ticking second by second.
What are some of the things that have caused this chronic inflammation?
All sorts of things. Environmental aspect, being exposed to certain foods, your gut microbiome changing over time, the other forms of oxidative stress that you which is chronic, and just bad lifestyle. Stress is a big mediator of cellular senescence. The higher level of all the proteins that your liver produce in response to stress. So there's all sorts of lifestyle factors that one can implement to reduce stress and also change the way that you eat and the way that you conduct your life, that can make an impactful difference to live a quality, healthy lifestyle and slow that inflammatory process over time.
This is my last question. I'm curious on your vision for Koya and what's coming in the future.
So my goal is to get our drug approved, Koya 302, which is the combination approved for Lou Gehrig's disease as our first indication, because like my father said, is don't do anything half-hearted, go all the way. We are motivated, and this is a mission-driven company. So my goal would be in the next 2 years is to provide strong and impactful evidence that the drug is working in patients. And we're going to be running a trial imminently to prove that hypothesis. So in a year and a half or 2 years, I hope to have that evidence that this drug is making a meaningful difference. But across other indications in Alzheimer's and in frontotemporal dementia and other diseases, we intend and we hope to do the same thing and continue to build on our successes. And we are looking to also not do it ourselves. We're expanding. Our goal is to continue to talk with other pharmaceutical companies and to join hands with strategic partnerships that can propel us even faster to get to where we want to go.
Well, Howard, I admire your personal story and the journey you are on as a founder CEO. I wish you the best of luck. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.